Cool. So today, a little bit different, I guess. We're gonna do a Q&R, Q&A. Q&R, quite like question and response. You heard that one before?
I've
Not
not.
heard Q. I was Q&R. So
I was
what's he
like, what
talking
is Jamie
about?
talking about?
Yeah, Q&R. Yeah, it's a little bit less arrogant to know that we have to say that we have the answers to every question. It's like we'll give a response.
Oh, I like that.
That is good.
It might not be true. We'll give
It's
our
our
best shot.
It's our current thinking at the moment. It's our current response. Yeah, that's better.
Exactly.
I like Q and R.
Q&R.
People take nothing else away from today and from the podcast. Q and R.
Q&R. Exactly.
I feel like that's now the title of this podcast now. Q&R question mark.
Q&R. There we go. So do you want to just give a bit of an overview about where some of these questions have come from? I know this is from a very specific place, but we're hoping that this would also be quite a helpful thing for people to listen to generally.
Yeah, sure. So Greg and I recently went and delivered a workshop for staff at the University of Ljubljana in Slovenia. I think we had around 50 participants, didn't we, Greg?
Yep.
People working in all kinds of roles at the university, supporting students, delivering lectures, that sort of thing. And we were giving them another sort of introduction into the approach and specifically looking at how you can use solution focused in sort of 5, 10, 15-minute conversations.
Mm-hmm.
So, if they've got a student who's panicking or upset, in front of them at the end of the lecture or in the university corridors, whatever, how can they use some of these ideas and some of these questions to good effect in a short space of time? So that was the workshop that we did, and we got some good engagement, and that led to a lot of questions. We had loads of questions from the group. And ultimately, because of time, we couldn't get around to all of them. So what we said is that we would, answer some of their questions in a podcast and put it on YouTube as well, so that they could see our answers to all of their questions, our responses. Sorry, not our answers, our responses to all their questions. And I think it should be helpful and useful for for the wider audience as well. So. That's
Great.
the idea for today.
Yeah, and we've got a fair few of them, so I guess we'll just get going, will we? So I'll just go through them, and then I guess if you firstly want to maybe elaborate on the question, potentially, if we need to do that, and then feel free just to have a go. So let's have a look. First one, I think let's start with this one. So what if you realise that your client is not equipped with coping strategies, and you know that they have to learn and develop them? So if they're not equipped with coping strategies.
Yeah, I think this is a challenging one, because this isn't so much a question about the practicalities of what you do in an SF conversation as such. For me, it's more about like the assumptions and the stance you take with that person. Mm-hmm. So I would say it's very rare that people don't have strategies like that. That's kind of, I don't know. It says a lot about the view you hold about a person, I suppose. So saying they don't have that, whereas from an SF standpoint, we're saying people do have those abilities, and they do have those abilities to develop them or learn them, or, build on the resources that they've already used in the past. Mm-hmm. And I think I might have said it in the training, but I think it's that idea of, especially students who get to a university level, this isn't the first time they're going to have faced adversity or difficulties in terms of assignments or life in general. They're going to have worked through quite a lot to have to get to that point. So I think it's maintaining that belief in the person, and then using the approach and the questions. So being able to ask them, little things like, how would they know they're moving forward in the right direction for them? They'll know that the answer to that question better than I could. But even that is separated from their best hopes. So if I'm trying to support them, I'd want to just start with saying, well, what are your hopes from talking with me? Like, how would you know that this has been useful? And then kind of seeing where that conversation goes from there. Go on, Ben. Go on. He's got that look again. People talk about my looks, but I think it's Ben's now.
Well, I mean, I am very practical. My answers tend to be quite practical, so I'll do the opposite to Greg. But and I also think I'm not going to be able to dig up exactly where this quote is from, but I've come across a quote from Insu Kim Berg before, which, I'm paraphrasing here, but basically said, if you really know something that could help a client and you keep it from them, then actually that's unethical. So there is a kind of a bit of a reality check there. So practically speaking, where some of these kind of assumptions and beliefs that are so critical for good solution focused work and so important, where it kind of hits and merges with the real life of practitioner client work, I would say is in the order that you do things. I think is a big part of this. So I would say that the practical middle ground here is to, first of all, give your client ample opportunity to come up with ideas and strategies themselves. To believe that they've got it what it takes to come up with some great stuff, to draw upon the resources that they already have. And obviously, as Greg has described, the way that we do that is by asking questions rather than giving advice. And then later on, if you feel like it would be ethical to supplement those ideas with some external strategies that you bring in, then you can do that. But it's about only doing so if necessary, and doing further down the line. Don't jump the gun and give people advice and strategies before they've had a chance to explore their own resources. And then, of course, when you actually deliver these strategies and ideas, when you actually offer them to people, you can do that in different ways. And a solution focused way of doing that would be to very much pitch it as an invitation and a choice. Broadly speaking, certainly my view would be that one of the easiest ways to empower people is to give them choice. And so a really simple thing would be, if you're going to show someone strategies and offer them strategies, give them multiple options and trust them to work out which one is the best fit for them. That's one way of doing it in a slightly more solution focused way. And then just the language you use. So pitching it as that invitation. You might want to try out one of these. It's worked for someone else, that sort of thing. Which is very different from going in with one strategy and saying you should do this. It would be really good for you if you did this. So, it's really important that we believe in our clients. We believe that they do have resources. And also, it's not an all or nothing thing, right? It might be that a client of ours already has the resources to get them 75% of the way there to whatever their hope or their aspiration is, or their target. And then you might sort of further down the road pitch him with, here's some other ideas, and they might take something, they might adjust it, right? So if you trust them with it, they might try out some different strategies, and they might tweak it for themselves. They might do it slightly differently to what you've seen others do, and that might get them the rest of the way there. So I think that's the order that we do things is really important. So give your clients ample opportunity to explore their own resources first, and then only if you feel an ethical duty to do so, do you bring in some other strategies. And when you do so, pitch it as an invitation and give as much choice as possible. Yeah. And I think Greg's got that face on him again, but I think the adjustment of strategies as well. So allowing for and trusting your clients to come up with their own adaptations of different things.
So Greg, what was your wince around the giving people suggestions, but
I probably need some more time to think about the what, but the one was about like the 75% thing. I don't know why, but that just makes me twitch a little bit. I'll have to think more about that. But I suppose the other thing that I totally agree with, like the order of things, like if it is something we do it last.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's almost something about checking in to even ask if they want to hear it. I think it's something that just popped into my head, just to say, it's almost like if you've had a good, as Ben said, you've given them ample opportunity to look at their resources and kind of their ideas, that might be enough. But then if you have others that you think might be useful, then maybe just that question of, would you want to hear some things that maybe have worked for other people when they've been in similar situations? I mean, I don't know that I would ask it very often, but I think if you had something, as Ben said, that ethically you felt you'd want to give an opportunity to put out there as an invitation, maybe it's worth just that bit of saying first, do they even want to hear it? And then that way it's kind of trusting them that bit more to say, no, I think I'm all right with this. But a lot of people probably would be curious and say, well, yeah, sure, go ahead. But then again, it's their choice, as Ben's saying.
Yeah, I guess like it's all very well like theoretically saying that our clients know and they have coping strategies, but if it's to the point where they can't even recognize them, then that is effectively the same as them not actually having. Do you know what I mean? Just because they might have them somewhere, but if they don't know what they are, then
then I see that's like, I don't know, this is probably a bit too harsh, but like that's my failure as a practitioner. Then if I haven't found the right questions or kind of worked hard enough, not worked hard enough, that's not fair to say. But if I haven't found the way of shining a spotlight on them or uncovering them or inviting them to remember them, then I need to think about what I'm doing. But I suppose that then in the short term, if maybe there are those ideas and those choices, that might be a good thing. But I wouldn't want people to walk away from it thinking, well, they need to know what I know, because I think it's more important that we focus on what they do already know and how we amplify those things.
Yeah, we're talking about really rare situations here, aren't we? Because the absolute vast majority of the time, we deliberately don't offer our own thoughts, ideas, strategies, and we have to remember again the reasons for that. And one of them that I always think of is, well, actually, if someone can overcome a challenge by drawing upon their own resources and their own ideas and their own expertise, then the next time a challenge comes along, they're probably more likely to be able to face it themselves. And think, I've got this, I've got what it takes. Whereas if they overcome a challenge by, leaning, heavily on other, professionals' intervention and expertise and support, then the next time something difficult comes along, they're more likely maybe to feel a bit helpless in the face of that and think, I need someone else to help me with this. And there's other reasons, but we have to keep those in mind. And the kind of truth is, I think this is probably a little bit harsh, but I think it's true that in sort of normal, day-to-day conversation and day-to-day, helping professionals and all the rest of it, we probably don't give a huge amount of time and space to, inviting people to explore their own ideas and resources, because, and partly is because lots of services are under pressure, time pressure, and people are, let's be honest, people are quite stressed out often in their jobs, and it's the shorter, quicker thing to do in the immediate term is to give something, try this, here's a strategy, go and use it, whereas actually it can take a bit of patience and holding ourselves back to invite people to explore their own resources and ideas, because often they don't roll off the tongue straight away, and people do really have to think about it. And so it's yeah, it's another one of those things that's counterintuitive. Well, we're only on our first question, aren't we?
I was just
say, yeah.
say.
The last thing I'll say on this, Jamie, is it's also like people in helping professions just often have that real desire to help as well. They just have a desire to want to help people, which is a great thing. And sometimes that can, in people's need and desperation almost to help someone, they're reaching out with X, Y, and Z and try X, Y, and Z, and giving strategies because they really, really want to help that person.
Yeah.
So sometimes it comes from a really good place as well, but it's not always the most helpful way of working.
Okay. Right. We'll move to a question that I think will be easier to answer quicker, so we can get through some of these. Although you never know, you two.
No, I was trying to keep us in check. Yeah, very difficult.
So a real practical one. Is there a value in including a third person? And the person that's asked this question have said, for example, another professional as part of the solution focused work. And if so, is the role of the third person to provide positive reinforcement in some way? So I guess typically you would assume that you would be working on a one-to-one basis. But yeah, so the person here is saying, is there ever an occasion where you'd have a third person in the room as well?
Yes.
That's the short answer, isn't it? You wanted a short answer.
Okay.
Yes.
Next question.
No. Well, I suppose it always depends on the context. And again, like working with the person you're kind of talking with. So we wouldn't just decide, kind of going back to your Q&A versus Q&R, like we wouldn't decide as an expert, oh, we need to bring this person in and they need to sit in on the session with you. I think it's more of if someone's coming up in a session or someone they're working with, you might then, I don't know. I think the example you had, Ben, on the training was you were working with a student and they were talking about a teacher that was quite supportive. And you thought, okay, well, maybe would you mind if you think it'd be a good idea if we did invite them in? And I think that's how that session came about. And I suppose it's similar with like family work. Whereas if, you've got a young person that you think, oh, there's this and this going on, could we do a session with their parents as well? Would they want that? Would they not want that? I think there's massive kind of advantages to having more people in the room that are there appropriately, not just for the sake of having an extra person sitting there, because it gives other people time and space to see things differently through someone else's eyes and through their lens. And it gives them time to think and reflect even on the other questions that are being asked. It makes a massive difference. That's probably a very short, not complete answer, but I'll hand over to Ben. I think he's chomping at the bit to say
That's all right. I'll try and keep it short. I mean, this is fair, like relatively new for me, but is increasingly part of my work. Just finding it really helpful of late to include third parties where appropriate. Greg's right about it being with permission of the of the client, and I tend to ask it's both. Who do you really get on with, but then also who knows you best is the other question that often, so who is it that knows you best, and who do you get on with, because they're the person that maybe believes in the most and is going to add to that conversation. They're not there to add positive reinforcement in terms of like direct, like giving encouragement and giving praise. But you hope that through asking them questions and through the client being there and hearing their answers, that actually will reinforce some beneficial messages. And even when, I mean, we do lots of mediation work with maybe families where relationships are broken down, and that's fairly tried and tested. I think I've started expanding that into schools, colleges, that sort of work as well. So the other area of using this and having a third party, although it's kind of like another client really, is maybe where you've got a situation where a relationship in a classroom is really broken down. So there's sometimes I'll look at, because often I'm called in to work with young people because they're on the edge of exclusion, right? And a lot of schools have some sort of behavior point system, and I'm not sure whether this, I'll let Greg comment on this, whether it fits in with solution focused or not. But there have been a number of times now where I've maybe noticed that, let's say 80% of the behavior points are coming from one teacher. And I'll just suggest, do you want to do a session or two together? Just the three of us, me, the student, and that teacher. And it's the difference question, which I absolutely adore. The difference question, and just that alone can just change something in the sort of the atmosphere and the relationship between those two people. Because you sit down with them and you say, all right, so what are your best hopes from us working together? And the student says, oh, I just want the teacher to stop picking on me and to leave me alone. They're always sending me out of the room, even though there's other people in the class talking. All right, see, now you want the teacher to stop picking on you. And teacher, what are your best hopes? Oh, I just want them to actually focus on their work and actually listen to me for once. Okay. So they're sort of at seemingly sort of polar opposites. One person saying, I want them to stop picking on me. I want them to actually do what I say, listen, etc. And then you just bring in the difference question a few times. So what difference would it make if your teacher stops picking on you? All right, I'm not going to challenge that. I'm not saying whether it's true or not. I'm just going to take their words. Okay, what difference would it make? Oh well, I'd have an easier life. I'd be more relaxed. That sort of stuff in the classroom. Okay, and teacher, what difference would it make to you if this student was, focusing on their work and doing what you say? Well, I'd be more relaxed. Okay, and within one question, you've suddenly found a bit of common ground. You've suddenly got to point out, oh, so both of you want to be a bit more relaxed, like in that classroom. Yeah. Oh, and we've just done one question. What difference would that make? And all of a sudden, you're on a different playing field. You've moved from he's picking on me, he won't listen to me, or she's picking on me, she won't listen to me, to we both want to be more relaxed. And again, I could go on about this for ages, but I love working in that way. I love working with two people at once like that. And that's a bit interesting, because I guess in one sense they're there as another professional, in another sense they're there as another client as well.
Yeah, that's good. You can really see the benefit of it when you describe it like that. Is there more complexity in it from your perspective though, as the kind of professional there? Like, is it a harder thing to do?
Yeah, good question.
I'm gonna say no.
Yeah, Greg's saying no. There you go. Yeah. Okay. I mean, that's the perception. If you want a short answer to this one, I think the perception would be that it would be harder work. Once you're into it and you've done it a few times and you've settled those nerves, I don't think it is harder. If anything, you've got more answers to draw upon. And if you're really struggling with a line of questioning with one of the people, well, you can switch to the other for a few minutes. So in some ways, it's actually easier.
Nice.
Always just make sure that you've the best hopes that you get from each. They just have to be able to coexist. That's the hard part. Once you get that nailed down, the rest of it will fall into place. Because if the teacher wants that child out, and the student says, well, no, I want to be here and learn, and you need to change what you're doing, then you're kind of you're not on that same page as Ben illustrated. But once you find that common ground, like Ben said, then you're off and running.
Yeah,
great. Okay, let's move on to another one. This one, I think you might need a little bit of context to it. In solution focused work, we're told not to move into action planning, so you might want to give a bit of context around that. How do you avoid action planning with your clients?
Yeah, I think this came from that idea of, and it's often a thing that comes out when we talk to people about this idea of the preferred future. And so if someone, I don't know, if someone said to us, my best hopes, I want to be calmer and more motivated, in my work. We could say, okay, and what would be the first sign that would you notice that would tell you? And you obtain a lot of this description of things they might notice, things other people might notice about them, the impact that then has on the work they're doing. So you're creating this, in a sense, almost a list of possible signs that then there's a massive, massive temptation to then say, okay, I now have 10 things I've described to you. So now those are the 10 things you're going to go away and do. Is that right? And that's not what we would do. We would stop before that, because we would just say the work is being done in inviting that description, getting someone to think about that and to describe it in that level of detail is the work happening itself. I mean, in all the years we've been doing this, I don't know what it's like for you, Ben, but I know some people have said, okay, no, that gives me a list, that gives me a few things, and they jot down and they say the next time you see them, you say, what's been better? And they say, oh, I've done all that stuff we talked about last time. Other people will say, I've done something different. And there's no kind of, at least nothing I can see as a rhyme or reason that would say why people are doing that. But it's the thinking that goes along with that people are kind of then left thinking about other ways they could do things, or, just wanting to be able to get to that place. So they do something different, and that sets them on the path of getting there. But I think we steal things. We steal that sense of possibility from people. I think if we give them an action plan, because then it's the only thing you can do to go back in the next session is then say, well, how have you done getting on with those 10 things you said you were going to do last time? And then we run that risk of either, best case scenario, missing out on something they've done that's worked. But I think worst case scenario, making them feel like they've failed because they haven't done those 10 things, even though life happens in between and they might not have had a chance to. So I think for me, it's very tempting to do, because that's, I think, where the conversation can go sometimes. But I think it's really hard, again, with the assumptions, to trust the client and trust the person you're talking to, that they will make the best decisions for themselves.
Yeah.
Don't know what you've got on that bone, Ben.
Well, can I just jump in with a little question in there? What
Go
if your client is like, the decision I've come to is that I need an action plan? Like,
yeah.
How's that work?
I think we run that the same way as Ben described sort of the options. It's kind of, okay, so what kind of things might you put on your action plan? Like, what kind of things would be good for you? How many points does a good action plan have for you? And sometimes people say, oh, well, I don't know, 3 things for me. Other people might say, oh, I need 10. I need 10. Okay. What kind of things from what we've been talking about might you want to try? And again, I think it's the trying, not these are the answers to, these are possible responses. I'm loving this Q&R thing, Jamie. These are the possible responses you could have, but they don't have to be the answers to everything right now. So it's more of a kind of co-create that with them and just ask the questions to say, well, from what we've been talking about, what are those? I don't know, if to say that they want 3 things. What are the 3 things you might want to try first?
Yeah. So we're not saying that action planning in itself is a bad thing if it's come from the person. Is that what we're saying?
Yeah. If someone says, I want an action plan, then we can ask some questions around that. But I suppose they're the ones that are going to be filling out that action plan, not me.
Okay.
So I'm not going to tell them, okay, so you need to have 5 things. It needs to be done by, 2 weeks time in our next session. It's going to be much more, what does a good action plan, look like for you? How many points do you think we should start with? And again, it's after we've had ample opportunity to discuss those things, that in terms of what it might look like for them. So then they can just kind of pick and choose ideas from either what we've talked about, or they might have other ideas altogether at that point.
Okay.
That'd be my take.
I've never had anyone ask, say, I want an action plan, but I have had someone say that they want a to-do list, which I guess is in similar territory.
Yeah.
And I remember when, as Greg has wonderfully described, you would just keep asking questions around, how they would create a to-do list that was best fit as possible for them. What what would that to-do list look like? And you go down into this minute detail of, what sort of things would they be writing on it? What would they notice about the way they were writing their to-do list? All that sort of stuff. And I remember one of their answers in that session was they said that they would write it in pencil, and the reason being that because they would be flexible with it and they'd be able to like rub it out and change it and that sort of thing. So yeah, I think that is how we would run with that. Someone ask. I mean, generally speaking, the sort of action from a solution focused perspective, as Greg has also mentioned, action planning is limiting in some ways, right? It's and actually in both ways. So we often talk about, it's limiting because a client might go away and do something helpful and beneficial that's not on the action plan, and it gets kind of missed, right? We also talk about how if something's on the action plan and the client doesn't meet it, then there's the sense of sort of failure that comes with that. But the third way, which doesn't get spoken about so much, is it can be limiting because maybe when we're putting our action plans together, we don't believe in these clients enough or give them enough credit. So there was one recently, just the last few weeks for me, where I was supervising, where all of the talk from a lot of the professionals involved, it was working with a young lad who's been school refusing for a long time, so staying at home, not attending school, and all of the talk was that the plan needs to be to put intervention into the family home, to go out and work with him in home, because he hasn't been in school for like 7 months and he's never going to get there. And it's like, hold on a minute, you haven't even given the guy a chance. You haven't even given him a chance. How about scheduling one appointment in school and just see if he turns up? And then lo and behold, the day comes round, and to everyone's amazement, he's there. But if it's an action plan kind of drawn up by professionals as opposed to something created by the client themselves, then it can limit people in all sorts of different ways.
Yeah, and I don't know if I'm reading maybe into this question a little bit, but the last bit of the question is, how do you avoid action planning with clients? So I guess if there's a temptation there, which I guess is natural, you want to kind of put together like, this is what you can do to make this better. Like, how do you actually avoid perhaps some practical tips of how to actually avoid that in a session?
Yeah. So I think this question was partly born out of the fact that these participants in Ljubljana, obviously English isn't their first language. And I think they were really conscious, and they commented that they noticed how particular we were about our language. And there's a lot of nuance in the language. And I think that's part of the reason they asked this. And it's around this idea of asking about signs rather than steps. Yeah. And actually the change in language is quite subtle, but it's really influential. So, in short, what we're basically asking is, what would be a sign that you are making progress, rather than what do you need to do to make progress, or what's a step you need to take to make progress.
Yeah.
So we're asking people for signs that they have moved forward, rather than steps that they need to take to move forward. If that makes sense.
Yeah, great. Nice. Okay, just for time's sake, perhaps we should move on. I'm not sure we'll be able to get through all of these. How about this one? How do you address the things that do not work well, and the problems on the way to success according to this approach? So I guess, it's thought that you never ever go near a problem. You don't talk about problems. So when they do come up, what do you do? Do you just ignore it?
No, don't ignore it. I think it's always, again, as Ben mentioned, that idea of how particular we are about the language being used. So the classic is always kind of seeing someone a second time or any follow-up and saying, right, what's been better since we last met? And the most common maybe not most common, that's probably not fair. I think that second session, sometimes you can get that response of, well, not much. And so then you have that choice of focusing on the not much that has gone well, or the flip side of that, which implies maybe a few small things have. And there's that delicate balance, I think, in one, listening to what's actually being said and thinking about what area we are focusing to choose on as practitioners. And because the language is there, and there will always be those times. And even if things, are really not going well, for me, it's that stance again with the assumptions that we have, and that idea of this isn't something that has like stopped their progress. It's kind of it's a bump in the road, and it's something that, in a sense, they've already been through if they're sitting there talking to me now. So it might still be going on, but I suppose they're doing something to survive it, to get through it, to make the most of it, to make it have the smallest impact it could possibly have on their lives. Like, they're working and they're doing something. So I want to ask questions about that. Like, how are you continuing to keep going through this? If we're not able to jump straight into those successes and things that are working, then we still dive into what's working within the problematic situation, if that makes any sense.
So it's almost like a really lovely opportunity almost you can kind of use those problems really well, can't you?
Yeah, definitely. I think so. Go on, Ben.
It's about perspective, isn't it? It's asking about things from a slightly different angle, from a slightly different perspective. The one of the sessions that I have recorded and use in training, which I often use to illustrate this point, which was going to make Greg smile because he thinks about it, is I refer to it as the hammer session, because I'm having this wonderful solution-focused conversation with this teenage lad who's telling me all about things that are going well, and then he drops in, "Oh, there was one, hiccup though. There was one bad thing." So, all right, and I got in a fight with a hammer. And you're like, okay, not as in he fought a hammer, but as in he was fighting with someone, and a hammer was drawn and was present. And of course, the problem focused way to approach that would be to ask all about why did you get into that fight in the first place? What caused that fight to happen? Again, the usual, trying to find out what went wrong and then kind of prevent it in the future or fix it. The solution focused perspective at least the route that we went down turned out to be along the lines of, how did you manage to prevent the hammer from being used? So the hammer was present, it was being wielded and waved around threateningly, but it was never actually used to hit someone. So the solution focused conversation was around, what did you do and how did you manage to draw the line basically and make sure that hammer was not used to hurt anyone? And he spoke about, talking to the other person about, we got to stop now, otherwise, the police will get involved. He spoke down to detail of like holding eye contact with the person as he said that, keeping his voice calm. I think at one point, as things started to calm down, he sort of said that he put a hand on a shoulder and sort of said, I really don't want to do this. I don't want to go any further, that sort of thing. And, I can't remember the exact details, but the point is that the narrative that came out of that conversation was of a young person who did have a sense of boundaries, who did have a sense of where the line was that he could not cross, and a young person who did have an element of self-control. Whereas if I'd gone down the route of asking the problem focused, how did this fight start, what caused it, etc., maybe you get a different narrative. Maybe you get a narrative of someone who doesn't have self-control and doesn't know where the boundaries are. So it's not about shying away from difficult conversations and difficult topics. It's about asking about them from a very particular angle.
Yeah. You're like a linguistic ninja.
I'm not sure about that, but I'll take it.
That sounds like another T-shirt that Ben needs.
Yeah, we should arrange a t-shirt. It's just like
The
anyway,
linguistic ninja.
Hey,
yeah.
now you've mentioned it, I have to show this T-shirt. How did you describe it, Greg?
This is what can't see it.
Oh, it's
There
not
you go.
happening, is it? Hold
Yeah,
on. Let me get
see
rid
it.
of my background.
So this is what not to do in solution focus. This is what SF is not.
There you go.
Just to clarify. So for people not watching the YouTube video and just listening to this, Ben's holding up a t-shirt. This is I don't know where to begin. So there's this snorkeler being mid swallowed by a shark. He's just got his thumbs up saying stay positive as he's about to get swallowed.
Yes.
Well, crunched on by the looks of it, actually, by a massive shark.
Yeah, that is not what not to do in SF. It is not about just stay positive no matter what. Just talk about positive things.
Yeah. Okay, so we're at about 45 minutes. So should we do one more? And then do you think?
Yeah, go on. Let's do one more.
Okay, so the one that's might need a little bit again of context about perhaps what this person means in particular. They've asked about a situation. So what would you do in this situation? A person has already in the past succeeded and achieved 10 out of 10. Then their performance dropped and they're not able to get it back. Maybe it is a motivational challenge, how to approach that example. So yeah, someone in the past has done what they need to do, 10 out of 10. But then since then, maybe their motivation's struggling. What would you do?
I think I would be very happy and excited to talk to that person, because if you're telling me they've done it before, then I've got the view they can do it again. I think this idea, there's a word I love using because it sounds like, I think we fall into this trap sometimes of thinking of like absolutes, like things are great and everything is working, or things are not great and nothing's working. And I feel like one word in there would change that sentence, in the sense of their performance dropped and they're not able to get it back yet.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't mean they can't ever get it back. I think if we take that view of someone can't ever get it back, that's doing them a disservice. I think they haven't gotten it back yet. So I would just be curious, again, kind of asking the questions around their hopes from the conversation, wanting to see, you've got two ways to go. You could look at that, if you were starting to just get it back like just a little bit, like this way of working that is right for you, it just started to show up just a little bit. What would be the first sign? What would be the first thing, tiniest thing you might notice? Or you've got, the past to go back into. You have a successful past that's just been described in a sense of they've had their 10 out of 10 before. So how have you been able to kind of work through challenges like this in the past and still get to that place you want to be? Obviously improving the language to contextualize it to their situation and what they're describing to you. But that's the gist of the point of they have that success in the past. And we always believe people have that success and that history. We just have to ask questions about it to bring it out, really. It's a short answer. What do you think, Ben?
I thought your answer was great, and I'm happy to stick with that. Yeah, I guess the only little thing that I could think to add at this point is, Greg's mentioned about checking in with people on various things today, and I think one of the areas here would be to check in around the 10, like what is the 10 for them, because change is constant, right? That's one of the solution focused assumptions. Greg's mentioned that in terms of incorporating the word yet, because change is constant, and that also applies to people's hopes and desired outcomes. So it may be that in the past, they achieved this 10 out of 10, whatever that looks like and was for them, and it may be that now, 3, 4, 5, 6 months, or however long it is down the line, actually their best hopes, their desired outcomes have shifted slightly. And so I think it's probably also worth checking in around what is that person's 10 out of 10 now, what it is, what is it that they'd really like to see happening in their life, because it might have shifted slightly as well.
Yeah. Yeah, great. Because it's interesting. I guess the temptation is to go, oh, you were a 10 out of 10. Like, what's happened? Right. Which is totally the opposite, isn't it, of what you're saying, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, that's, change is constant, and you're just going to, I guess, if you take that view of feeling awful whenever someone slips from a 10 out of 10 down slightly, you're probably going to end up feeling pretty fed up about life and your work.
Yeah.
I think in solution focused, it's probably more about if someone reaches a 10 out of 10 in their own words and they're really happy with where they got to. In solution focused work, either you're saying, "Great, see you later. I don't need to be in your life anymore," or you're saying, "Okay, you've achieved that. What are your best hopes now? What's the desired outcome you're after next?" And actually, that whole scale, that whole trajectory shifts and changes onto something else.
Yeah, that is what first sprung to my mind when I read that question, was like, why are you still working with them? Like, what? So how does that work? Like, quickly, when do you know that the end is done? Like, the end is there. Is that when someone's hit that number that they said they wanted to hit, and then you're like, done, next? Like, how does it work?
I think the simplest answer is when the person we're talking with tells us they're done. I think in a clinical way. I think it can be more complicated in other organizational settings that might say, you need to do six sessions with this person. But I think as Ben said, it's I don't know. It's asking those questions and checking in, really, to say,
yeah,
are there things you still want to work on? What are your hopes from whatever sessions we have left? And, or what's your confidence in maintaining the progress you've made? Those sorts of things. You can kind of build those things up. And when people are saying, no, I'm really confident and that I'm going to be able to maintain this progress and I'm happy with that, then generally people just say, thanks and bye.
Yeah.
I guess this question came from someone who's, who working at a university and may be involved in this student's, life for 3, 4, 5 years.
Oh, I see.
So,
Okay.
so it's a bit, it's not quite the same in terms of, right, we finished our work, see you later. But I guess you can draw a close to, particular types of conversation, right? So even if you're still going to be in that person's life and working with them on different things, on, I don't know, teaching them geography or whatever it is they're studying, then you can still sort of draw a line to, on having those particular conversations around, helping them boost their confidence or whatever it was they wanted support with, and then then revert back to your kind of normal discussions around the content of what we're teaching, that sort of thing. So yeah, there is still a sense of kind of drawing that particular line of conversation to a close. And the other phrase I'll just throw in here at this point would be the phrase "good enough" is often helpful to people in these scenarios. So saying to people, so where would be? We haven't really mentioned scales, but it seems like in this question they've said 10 out of 10, so it sounds like they're maybe using the idea of a scale, or at least the idea of numbers, to kind of measure progress. So we might ask someone, so where would be good enough? Where would you need to be from 0 to 10 for you to be able to be satisfied enough to say, yeah, that's good enough for me? And it might be that person says, actually 7 out of 10 would be okay. And then it's more of a case of like, okay, well, if you can consistently stay somewhere between 7 and 10, then that's good news.
Yeah,
it doesn't need to be perfect all the time. Yeah.
Okay, so we managed to get through most of those questions, actually. Apologies to, I guess, anyone that's kind of listening to this and their question hasn't been addressed. But I think we should do more of these type of things because I think this is
Yeah.
really useful. So we'll keep hold of perhaps the ones we didn't do.
Yeah.
Sure.
And save those for next time we do Q&R, because I know we kind of put this call out quite a lot, but if there is anyone that's got any other questions, then we'd happily put them into another podcast like this. So send them over to us. It'd be really appreciated.
Yeah, you could always message us on social media channels or email us at info@sfpossibilities.org.
Well remembered, Greg.
Yeah, well done, Greg.
I always remember it. You guys always forget it.
Yeah. Yeah, I have no idea why they're either. It's not even that complicated, is it?
It's not. But
really.
We're busy people with lots on our minds. It's okay.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thanks for your responses, guys, and thanks everyone for your questions. And we'll speak to you soon. We'll see you soon. Won't see you soon. We'll speak to you again soon.
Definitely. I think we're going to pretty consistently put these podcasts on YouTube as well now, aren't we? So
yeah,
we'll see people soon.
Yeah, definitely.
Cool. All right. See you later.
Thanks, everybody.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.